describe my art as interdisciplinary because I like using painting as a tool to research other topics that interest me. And at the moment, that means researching and painting every bird mentioned by Shakespeare. And the most common question I get about this project is, how did I come up with the idea? And it all started with an argument I had, of course, as an undergraduate student at Carnegie Mellon in 2009. I didn't really have an interest in Shakespeare, but I figured if I was getting a humanities degree, I should know a thing or two about Shakespeare by the time I graduate. So I took a class purely out of obligation, and I ended up discovering an unexpected appreciation for his work. And after class, I would often get lunch with a friend of mine who is a computer science major. And one day he said, you know, I'm sorry, but I don't like Shakespeare. He's boring. I don't know what he's saying. I think people who say they like him are totally kidding themselves. He's overrated. And I said, okay, I can agree with some of that. He can be boring. He's definitely complicated. I don't always know what he's saying. But I don't think he's overrated because anyone could appreciate what he's contributed to the English language. And I cited a statistic I had just learned in one of my classes, that the average American college graduate has a vocabulary of around 15,000 words. Shakespeare, just what he demonstrates in his writing, has a vocabulary of 30,000 words. 1,100 of those words he either invented or he introduced. And then I said, just look at how many birds he mentions. Like, he knows so many birds. He mentions 65, and that's just birds. And when I said that out loud, I thought, that would be a good idea for a painting. So a couple years later, I did this 8-foot-long painting of feathers from all of Shakespeare's birds floating on the white page. And it ended up finding a home here at the Folger Shakespeare Library in 2013, and it's still in their administrative offices. And I went on to do other things. I did a Fulbright in Turkey, and I started a family, and I moved around a lot. And in the back of my mind the whole time I thought, you know, that Shakespeare bird thing was a good idea, and maybe one of the best ideas I've had, and I feel like it could be bigger than just one painting. So I said, when I have the time, I'm going to come back to this. So COVID, of course, gave me that time. I got laid off from my job, and I thankfully had a home studio, and I was hanging out there all day. And I thought, now's the time. So I figured the natural expansion of the concept would be to do one painting for each bird. And 65 paintings is a really big collection, so I have the dual challenge of making sure everything feels very cohesive, like one collection and series, while also wanting each painting to offer something unique and distinct for the viewer. I don't want the work to get boring. So I created this uniform composition, which you can see, where I have the birds centered within a garland border of objects. The objects are supposed to offer natural science facts about the bird and also literary interpretation. So I always include feathers, eggs, and nests, if possible, carefully measured and rendered at life size. Eggs are also always numbered in average clutch size for how many eggs are laid in one brood. And then I also include objects that refer to how the bird is used in Shakespeare's work. So for example, in the Kingfisher, on the right side I have the barometer, and that's the earliest example of a barometer. The mercury in the shaft indicates favorable weather, and that's because the kingfisher, otherwise known as the halcyon, was believed to conjure favorable weather and make peaceful waters. So dead kingfishers were sort of carried around by sailors as like lucky charms. And if you held one up by a string, presumably, its beak would point in the direction of the wind. And there's even a line in King Lear that says the character of Kent is lamenting the fact that people change their opinions about the king so often, just as much as a kingfisher's beak spins in the wind. So I'm always going back to the text, trying to make sure the work reflects how Shakespeare viewed these birds. And then also the diving kingfisher is aimed at 16 minnows, and that's because that's the average amount of fish a kingfisher eats in a day. So just every detail, trying to be very thoughtful about it. As you can tell, it's a lot of information. I'm not a historian, I'm not a Shakespearean scholar, I have a painting degree. So I realized very quickly that I was in over my head, and if I wanted this project to be really good, I'm just going to have to reach out to people around the world and see if anyone would be willing to act as an advisor. So on that journey, I came back to the Folger Shakespeare Library, pretty much like my first stop. And it was suggested that I applied for an artistic research fellowship, which I won in 2021. And the librarians were amazing in giving me the best resources to immerse myself in the past. And then they also connected me to Dr. Haley Swenson, who's here tonight. Haley graciously agreed to be my advisor for Shakespeare. She is a Shakespearean scholar who specializes in naturalism. And so each painting, because it's so detailed and there's a lot of things I can't, include, each painting is paired with a 1,500-word essay. And in the beginning of the project especially, I was sending those essays to Haley to check, basically, fact check and offer her insights. I also was working with Dr. Cody Dean, who is an avian ecologist in Fairbanks, Alaska. I was sending him illustrations of my birds, and he was correcting the anatomy. And then finally I thought, okay, well, if I'm going so far to make sure that the Shakespeare element is strong and the bird element is strong, I have a lot of plants, so I suppose I should do my due diligence with the plants. So I'm also working with Harriet Ricks, who is a botanist in London. She's not only checking the accuracy of my plant illustrations, but also making sure they capture how those plants would have looked in early modern England. Because especially with the ornamental flowers, they've been bred over generations to evolve with our changing aesthetic tastes. So a sunflower today looks different than a sunflower back in the 1600s. As a bonus, just because I like a challenge, as you can tell, I figured I would also make sure all of Shakespeare's plants are included in the work by the end of the series. I think he has about 186 plants. But there's a lot of natural crossover between bird habitat and diet and nesting material and Shakespeare's plants, so it's not as difficult as that sounds. Yeah, it's been, I suppose I'm working a lot to immerse myself in the past, like I said, but there's also been moments where I realize how important it is that I'm staying tuned into what's going on in contemporary scholarship as well. And the Folger librarians have been really good about always making sure they include a balanced inclusion of contemporary scholars working in either this field, naturalism, or eco-criticism. And I have a funny anecdote that shows how important that is. One of the essays I had sent to Haley about the wren included this little ornithological fact that it was believed at the time that the wren was the smallest bird in the world, and that's how Shakespeare represents it. It was also believed that the wren, which is this bird right here, was the female counterpart to the robin being male. So I had put in this essay that that's one example of how we can see that we've progressed so far in the science and we have a better understanding of nature. Because Shakespeare has that error. And, people love finding errors in Shakespeare's work because it brings him down from being a god to being a man. So I very gleefully wrote that, like he got that wrong. And so Haley read it and she said, now how do you know that he got that wrong? How do you know he didn't really know that the wren isn't the smallest bird? Because globally it's the bee hummingbird, and lots of hummingbirds are smaller than wrens. And I said, well, I don't know if they knew about hummingbirds because he doesn't mention one. And she said, well, how do you know? And I said, because my references said so. And she said, well, what's your primary reference? And I said, James Edmund Harding, who wrote The Ornithology of Shakespeare. That's my favorite book on this topic. And she said, okay, and when did that come out? And I said, 1871. And she said, yes, I thought so because you write like an old man from the 1800s. And I said, I do? And she said, yes, because you're perpetuating prejudices that were common in 19th century academia. I was like, I am? Because I'm writing about birds, I thought I was very far away from controversy, but apparently I wasn't. And she said, yes, she said there was a very widely held opinion in 19th century academia that because knowledge is foundational and we're always building off knowledge of the past, and that means people of today, we are smart, we know more. People of the past, they are dumb, they know less. And she says, when we read written records, we have to remember that we're not always reading a record of fact, but we are reading a record of value. And it just so happens that the wren is described as the smallest bird because that comes from a very popular Celtic folktale. And that's the character that it plays in a lot of folktales. And it could just be that that's more important to Shakespeare's audience, and that's why it was written down. So I took that question into the Folger library, their reader's room, and I checked out naturalist illustrations by Ulysses Aldrovandi and Pierre Ballon, and also Francis Willoughby, all written between about 1500 and 1620. And yes, I found illustrations of hummingbirds. And there aren't native hummingbirds in the British Isles, I'm pretty sure. But Shakespeare mentions lots of exotic birds, so it's possible that he would have known, like, it was in the cultural conscious at the time. So with that, I ended up moving a little further away from trying to squeeze in ornithological facts to either prove Shakespeare did or didn't know a lot about birds. And instead, I just let myself get on the roller coaster of following what the birds meant to the people of the time. So I know we're also not just here to hear about how the project has evolved, but also hopefully to get some fun bird facts. So I do have some. Since we were on the topic of the wren, I'll return to that one. So the Celtic folktale I had mentioned, the story goes like this. All the birds of the avian kingdom come together to have a competition to see who can fly the highest and be crowned king of all birds. And all the birds take off, and not surprisingly, the eagle soars above the rest. But at the last minute, it doesn't know it, but a tiny wren has hitched a ride on its back. So just as the eagle reaches its apex, the wren jumps off a few inches higher and gets crowned the king of all birds. So this clever trickster wren is the one we see in Shakespeare's work. For example, in Macbeth, Lady Macduff is incensed to find out that her husband has fled the country, leaving her and her children vulnerable to Macbeth's wrath, and they are surely going to be murdered. And she says, even a tiny wren has the courage to peck at the talons of owls that attack its young. I'm paraphrasing there because I'm not a Shakespearean actress. And so for Lady Macduff, I have two owl feathers on either side. I also have an eagle feather at the bottom, and then of course a crown for the king of all birds. At the top of the crown, there is a finial of a gold eagle, and then a tiny wren, which I added, jumping off its back. The ribbons are all references to Wren Day. Does anyone here know about Wren Day? So it's celebrated on December 26th, so it's a holiday bird, believe it or not. The wren is a symbol for St. Stephen, a Catholic saint. St. Stephen's Day is December 26th, and because it falls between Christmas and Epiphany, that's a period of time, that's the period of misrule where you have the Feast of Fools and the Lord of Misrule, and the Fool is crowned king for a day, these kinds of holidays. So Wren Day is kind of like that. Any other day of the year, it's apparently bad luck to hunt for a wren, but on Wren Day, people will go out and hunt for wrens. Or maybe they have a little wooden sculpture one, that's probably what I would do. And they will take that wren and parade it around town and go door to door singing. So the harlequin-colored ribbons are a reference to that. Then for another holiday bird, the turkey, obviously. Have to talk about the turkey. So I love the turkey because it's always a surprise to people that Shakespeare mentions the turkey, because of course it's a New World bird, so wouldn't that have been a lot later than Shakespeare? And no, because actually North America was being colonized by the British at the same time Shakespeare was writing his plays. And we always talk about how young the United States is, but we always think of Shakespeare as if he's so far back in time, but actually it was at the same time these two things were happening. So the turkey originates in Mexico, but it was brought further north into North America by Spanish explorers. Then it was picked up by British colonists and taken into England for trade. And it arrived on the same ships that were carrying goods from Turkey. So there was an association between turkeys and Turkey. And I believe in France, it's known as the India bird for a very similar reason. It would arrive on trade routes bringing Indian goods. You can kind of tell in paintings when there's not a lot of folklore for me to draw on because it's a lot more of the nature feature. I have a personal theory that the turkey was kind of new at the time, so maybe there wasn't enough time for the folklore to develop. The way it's mentioned in Shakespeare, it's brought up 4 times, sort of as a metaphor for a proud, puffed up male. But during Shakespeare's time, when turkeys were first introduced, which was the mid-1500s, they were probably seen pecking around estates of really fancy homes because they were this curiosity, this cool bird. For a very short period of time, it did usurp the peacock as the fancy bird to have at like royal banquets. But because turkeys are so easily domesticated and they're easy to herd and they have really big broods of 13 chicks at a time, they reproduced really fast and flourished in domesticity. And so it trickled down to common dinner tables very fast. So the whole idea of having turkey for a holiday meal, Shakespeare may have very well had turkey for a Christmas dinner. And that tradition was imported back into the United States. So that's actually a British tradition of having turkey for holiday dinners. Then we also have the goose. Fun fact about the goose, I don't know if this is too much information, but my water broke when I was painting it. So it's the mother goose, that's how I think of her. But the goose, to give you a little bit of context and reference, the heron is mentioned once, the wren is mentioned 9 times, the turkey is mentioned 4 times, and the goose is mentioned 31 times. So many geese, and only the word goose is used. So I used the most common domesticated and wild goose in England, which is the grey lag goose. It's called grey lag because it lags behind the other migratory geese and sticks around year-round. It means lots of things. It can mean, the term Winchester goose is a euphemism for syphilis, and it also can mean fool. That's to call someone a goose is an insult, to say that they're foolish. It also pops up sometimes when characters are discussing what they're going to eat for dinner, so sometimes it just shows up that way. And then other times it's an allusion to writing, which is the important one I'm going to get to at the end. But in terms of the goose being a fool or foolish, there's this fantastic scene in Romeo and Juliet when Mercutio and Romeo are sparring and doing their teenage boy, like insulting each other thing. And they are just trading goose puns back and forth, rapid fire, goose, 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 goose. And Romeo knows his geese really well, and he's the one that wins that war of the words. But that's just a funny time when geese show up. But in terms of how the goose is referenced for writing, so I don't know if anyone in the audience is like in this niche subculture that's crazy about fountain pens. But I think I had mentioned that all of these birds have open trapdoors to discovering new, rabbit holes into different areas of culture I've never been to before. I didn't realize people were so particular about pens, and pen people are like super passionate, really intense. And they've always been that way because feather quill people were just as intense. And if you wanted to make the perfect feather quill, you would want a swan perhaps, or a goose, the biggest goose, which is the grey lag goose. And you would specifically want the second primary flight feather. Domesticated would be better than wilds because it would be in better condition, a nice pampered goose. And then also you would want it from the right wing, because if you're writing with your right hand, the feather curves away from your face and it's not hitting you in the face as you're writing. So I loved learning about that, specifically because it is connected to this book that was recommended to me by Haley and also the Folger librarians, and it's in the Folger's collection, called Birds and Other Creatures of Renaissance Literature by Rebecca Ambach, who's a professor at University of Alabama, where my mom went and where my sister went, Roll Tide. And but this book talks a lot about the creaturely hierarchy. To summarize, Descartes is really one of the first philosophers who made a divide between human, who was created in God's image, and animal, which is a machine and everything else. And before that, all the creatures that were created by God lived in one single hierarchy. We were all sort of in the same, we were understood in similar terms to each other. Humans were at the top because we had imagination and artistry and divine intelligence. But then right below us would be birds, because through flight they had physical proximity to the heavens. So through this shared connection to God, birds and people were seen to be pretty closely related. And there's this wonderful illustration in the Folger's archive in the Pierre Ballon animal anatomy book that shows very clearly a comparison between a human skeleton and a bird skeleton, trying to show how closely we are related to each other. It shows our desire to be connected with birds. And the feather quill also very much shows, in one object, the one thing that really elevates us as people through our art and our imagination, philosophy and thought, the way that we record all of these things, and then the object that also elevates physically birds, makes them so special and desirable to us. So the feather quill I love now. I think it's so cool, and one of these days I'm going to get better at calligraphy. So I did my very best up in the painting. But, so that's all I have. I hope everyone learned something new about Shakespeare and birds. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And again, please keep coming back to the Folger Shakespeare Library. I could just shower this place with praise, especially the staff, and also my parents who are here tonight. Thank you so much for all of your support, and all my friends who came out. Okay, that's all done.
Is this in a booklet somewhere with your?
So I am halfway through. I'm almost at 30. So I'm at 29, almost there. So I eventually hope to make it a book. Yes, that's in the works, but probably 5 years down the road at best.
Are there no eggs in the one over there?
Oh, the wren?
Yeah.
Oh, they're teeny tiny, right
Oh my
down
goodness,
here.
okay.
Yes. Smallest bird in the
Small
world.
birds.
You use the word eco-criticism, and I'm not familiar with that term. So
That's a funny word because it's a buzzy word. I hear it a lot myself. And every time I ask someone to define it for me, they struggle, like I'm going to struggle right now. But I believe it's trying to understand how people, analyzing our relationship to nature over centuries, and how our relationship to nature has changed, how we engage with it. And I think also looking back on natural text with a more critical lens. Am I right? Yes.
And also, I have another question. What is in the nest? Is that a rosary?
Yes. So the blackbird is only mentioned, I think, twice. And it was a symbol for Saint Kevin. And so because it was a Catholic symbol, I decided to include the only existing rosary from the Protestant Reformation that was hidden away for a long time. It's called the Langdale Rosary. But I figured that I would put it in the painting as an allusion to its Catholic importance, even though it's not necessarily in Shakespeare's work. But Catholicism is, on the periphery of some plays, of course. And so I figured that the rosary, I would have it there, but obscured and just kind of, present but hidden. Yes?
When you're at painting 29, when you start each painting, do you start in the same place? What is your process for composition?
Yes, that's a tricky one. So I normally start off reading about 5 books that are from various centuries, really, where they might have like an overview of the bird. So I'll just quickly check the glossary, see if they've mentioned it before. I have read most of the books front to back anyway. And so I'll get like a pretty general idea of all of its symbolism that really is what defines it. Then I'll check out where it appears in Shakespeare's works. I use shakespeareswords.com, and it'll give me like all the plays where it's mentioned. So then I'll read those plays, or at least the scene. And one time, So with the wren, I did all that, and I normally get started on the painting first because that's where it's most fun for me. The writing's the chore. So I paint the whole thing with sort of an idea in mind. I don't do sketches, I don't do drafts, I go straight to paint. And then, so with the wren, I did all that, finished a painting, went back to write the essay where I go into more detail. And sometimes in the essay, I'm like, oh, I'll add one of those, or I'll add something like that. So additions are made. But, oh my gosh, Wren Day, I didn't learn about Wren Day until after I finished painting the wren. And it was not, the painting, all of a sudden the painting was totally irrelevant and totally incorrect. So I had to rip it. I know, because I didn't want to be, I had to move on. I couldn't get attached to it, so I ripped it. And I started fresh and I redid the whole thing. But that's the only time I've had to do that. But because as my research progresses, a lot of the birds in folklore have relationships with each other. And sometimes there's really nuanced things that I don't realize until down the road. So I often have to go back in and make corrections. So I can't sell any of the originals for that reason, because the project is always evolving, even paintings I finished a couple years ago. Oh, but I do have a print series, life-size prints that are exact replicas of the originals, which I personally sell, and then also smaller, signed but not numbered, unlimited prints, which are here in the at gift shop. So check those out. Yes.
Do you have a specific way you're going about the order of choosing the birds? And if so, which one are you saving for last to some degree?
Oh, I'm saving mythological birds for last. So that's the griffin, harpy, phoenix. And also, if I'm going by the standards of the time, that might also include the bat, Pegasus, largest butterflies, and angels. That would increase my number to like 70, so but otherwise, when I choose my next bird that I tackle, I'm like, I'm going to do this today, and so I try to be spontaneous when I can.
What's the significance of the moon phases in the gray heron?
Oh, it was believed that the heron would gain and lose weight by the waxing and waning of the moon. The heron is only mentioned once. That's in Hamlet, when, of course, he says, when this wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw. So that's Hamlet kind of tipping his hand, like, yeah, I'm only crazy when I want to be crazy. I actually know who's the predator and who's the prey. And handsaw is another word for heron. That's what my footnotes say. That's because apparently herons were very popular prey for falconry, because they're huge birds, and so it's pretty surprising that they can be preyed upon by falcons. So it makes for kind of a spectacle if you ever see it in life. I've seen it once. Actually, Mom, you saw it once but anyway, in the wild, because a heron will keep flying higher and higher, but it won't fight back at all. So there was a belief that the heron was cowardly. It was used as a synonym for a coward.
Well, about creativity and doing what calls your spirit to do that day, how do you feel about all the knowledge you've gained? Is it a weight, or is it more helpful to being creative?
It's fun. When I was in art school, I felt like I was constantly being told to look inward for inspiration. What's my opinion on this? What's my messaging? What's my personal style? And I got frustrated because I felt like I was being encouraged to be kind of self-absorbed. And also the contents of my mind are limited, and I can only mine so much there. And so I ended up getting an interdisciplinary degree that I had to craft myself with art history, because I wanted to find, I wanted a treasure trove of subject matter, which I knew the world had and not my own mind. So I think looking outward has always fed me and kept me interested in my work, because it's lonely in studio. When you're just painting about your feelings, it gets old real fast. I mean, I do that plenty, don't get me wrong. I can only do so much. Yeah.
All right, we have time for just one or two more questions, if anyone has one.
Miss you. Oops, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
no, I think.
I just was curious to know if you had a favorite.
A favorite?
That was my question. So
I just finished The Pelican, which I think I like because as a new mother, I'm not going to say this was my experience or anything, but the pelican is a symbol of maternal love and devotion and maternal self-sacrifice, and the pelican was believed to stab itself in the chest with its own beak and feed its chicks with its own blood. And it was just so wild. And it was like, I think the painting's kind of metal. I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know, bring something fresh to the collection. So, yeah, I think that painting, that bird was such a surprise, and it was so different. So I think that one's probably my favorite at the moment.